Welcome to Escape This Podcast, a show that's a mix between tabletop role-playing and escape room puzzles. And we have covered the escape room puzzles in last bonus episode.
So now we pivot.
So now we pivot over to tabletop role-playing games. And I ask you, Danny, the question that we ask all of our guests. What's your tabletop role-playing experience?
A funny kind of moderate, like more than the people who have just played one game. But I'm also definitely not one of those, oh, yep, been in the same group 3 years, same character a whole time, doing great. Level 14. Is that normal?
I think that's a normal amount of experience, right? It's like...
Oh, I meant is level 14 normal for a 3-year campaign?
I don't know, probably. Depends on the game. Yeah, that's fair. I feel like I've probably got more of the general experience with that.
Pretty much anything that I've done, you've done, plus you've done
any game
more on
you
top
can
of
play,
that.
I can play better.
I mean, I didn't know that they existed until we were going out, which granted
Yeah,
was
that was
some time ago.
Right?
Yeah, that was
16.
15 years ago.
So, yes. Well, no, that's fair. So, like, the games that we played, I probably ran some games for you when we were younger.
You were my first GM.
True. And I was a GM, not a DM, because I don't play Dungeons and Dragons.
No, I only played that like twice.
Yeah, very, very few games. But yeah, so have you been in campaigns have you been in a non-recorded game that I haven't run? That's a question I have for you.
That you haven't run?
Yeah.
We did...
we did a D&D game non-recorded together as players.
Yeah, that's true. Part of when we were doing Dragon Age campaigns, Tess ran.
Yes, and of course you ran.
Just one of those.
Dragon Age.
I've done a little good little handful of GMing myself.
Yes, I always enjoyed having you as a game master.
Oh, thank you.
You had some very story-focused, fun, interesting campaigns.
Oh.
So let's talk about some systems that we've played, right? Because we're just sort of chatting about it, but I want to talk about. So, for me, when I first started playing tabletop role-playing games, the system that I learned and played was a game called MERP, which is Middle-earth role-playing. It's a game that was made in the 80s, I think, by Iron Crown Enterprise, who make Rolemaster and Harp and some other games. And I loved it.
Did you start out playing Raw? I mean, I know Raw has a very different meaning in some things, like a full version of it, because I know that by the time you introduced me to it, you were doing a bit of a combo mix between MERP and Rolemaster.
So MERP is like... So the way MERP works, it's Middle-earth role-playing, and it's set in Middle-earth, so it's all Lord of the Rings. Even though that doesn't necessarily map onto the clear Dungeons and Dragons influences in its character classes and the fact that there's like magic systems that work. You know, magic in Middle-earth is much more vague than the solidified version of being a magic user in this game, right?
And you want to use magic in combat, you got to wait until you've got your magic maxed out for that.
There aren't a huge amount of magic spells that work in combat. You get one at level 3 that works well, and then you don't get like another one till level 7 or something. It's wild. But
It's mostly things like the spell of boil water.
Things like that, exactly. Lots of good movement spells.
And no, you can't boil someone's blood with that.
But so it was a great game, and it's built on... I always find it fun to describe. It's like a table lookup RPG. Because every time you roll, you roll a D100. So it's 2 D10s. Pick a 10, pick a 1. Before you roll, obviously. So you roll it, you get a roll out of 100, you add your bonuses, you check your result, and very often you're checking your result against what you are attempting on a table. And that table might be, here's the difficulty of your checks, and you can see all of the different results and what they will give you.
Like what armor they're wearing, what size they are, all of that sort of thing.
And so while that's a wild system, it was also really smart. Like, I love the way they work with armor, because it means you can have a complicated system for armor that is baked into the table calculations, but not into the game. You don't have to calculate it when you're playing, right? D&D is a very simple armor system. Sorry, everybody, I'm talking about role-playing mechanics. D&D is a very simple system of just like your armor is represented by a value that you add to your defense, and now it makes it harder to hit you. But because of that, you can't get into much subtlety and weirdness, whereas MERP, because it basically pre-calculates everything and then you look up, oh, what did my result mean? And you don't have to do any calculations, can do more complicated stuff like, oh, the less armor you're wearing, the harder it is for you to get hit because you're more mobile. But when you do get hit, you'll be taking more damage from the people that hit you. That's quite a complicated series of computations to do, every time. So they do it for you. And then you just think, well, here I have an attack roll of whatever. And if I look if someone's wearing no armor, it doesn't hit them at all. If someone's wearing leather armor, it doesn't hit them at all. Once they're wearing chain armor, it hits for 8 damage. And if they're wearing plate armor, it hits again for 4 damage. If I were higher up the chart, if I got a better roll, it might hit all types of armor. And then you would see like, oh, now it's so high that it hits people with no armor and it does 28 damage. But the same thing is doing 8 damage if they're wearing plate. So they have these really complicated systems that you don't need to worry about because they're kind of done before.
Very
and you just look up
true.
the result.
So if you like reading tables and not...
I love reading tables.
Then it's fine and it works great. I remember having some frustration because I tended to like playing rogue or ranger sorts of characters. So my first character was a bow user. And using arrows, it felt like I never did damage to anyone unless I got a crit.
That's interesting. Yeah, I don't remember how those things worked out. But no, we were mixing it with a few things. So that is the same basic system that Rolemaster uses, which is a way more overly complicated version of MERP. But some of the supplementary material for Rolemaster, therefore, you could work with MERP, right? Because they'd basically be like whole books of new tables. So you'd
you definitely had a book that was just
MERP
tables.
had like 4 tables for attack, which were just based on, do you have a sword? Do you have a thing that's heavy? Do you have a thing? Very, very general classes. And then we had a Rolemaster supplement called Arms Law that had literal your own table for every single weapon.
Yep.
Like, here's the scimitar table. Here's the 2-handed scimitar table. Here's the like just a table for every weapon. So once you had a weapon, you'd be like, grab that table, give it to you, and now when you roll, that's what you check.
And one other thing that was built into it was alongside the damage that you do, if you did well enough, you would get a crit. And the table would then take you to the crit table.
And all the crits had their own effects. So in the basic rules of that, if you've ever played Dungeons & Dragons, some people play with crit decks, which is when you get a crit, pull a card and it tells you the thing that happens. That was built into MERP. And it was something that Iron Crown did really well. And I think then D&D people have adapted themselves in as third-party stuff for D&D.
And again, that was one of those things I felt like I was missing out on playing an archer.
And you weren't getting crits well?
No, because a stupid little arrow doesn't crit unless you do it absolutely perfectly. To, roll 200 from your D100. Definitely a possible thing.
Yes,
you just needed to roll over 96 or 96 and above.
96 and above, you roll again and you add it on. And if you roll that multiple times, you can roll huge.
And if you didn't do that, your arrow could not do a crit. And it was just disappointing, saying, oh, yeah, you do 3 damage. Oh, person with the scimitar, I guess. All right, let's just see what your crit is. Oh, cool. You go straight up through the gap in his armpit and his arm comes off. That's so exciting.
Yeah, that was exciting. I'm so sorry that didn't happen. One of my best moments playing that game, one of my most memorable moments as a player happened from an arrow. We were getting chased by a troll, a cave troll, classic Lord of the Rings enemy, cave troll. And we were running because it was impossible to beat. And then one of our team turned around and went, no, I've got one last arrow. I'm going to fire that. Fired it, rolled absurdly high, rolled really well on the crit. Arrow went into the eyeball of the troll, killed it instantly in one hit. And he was like, oh my gosh. What have I done? It's amazing. It was the best. It was fantastic. But no, I played that for a while. I played it as a player with some friends, initially with friends of my older brother, and then just played with that.
One of them GM'd, right?
One of them GM'd. Both they swapped off.
Oh, okay.
And we did mostly all not pre-made campaigns. Everyone would write their own homebrew campaigns. I've really
I didn't know that
played.
preset campaigns were a thing.
Yeah, I've never really run or played in preset campaigns until very recently. And it's fun to have that sort of like people creating their own stuff. That to me is what RPGs were when I was young. Like that was the idea. You always write your own campaign.
It's very interesting because people will normally think that having a pre-written campaign is just going to be so much less work for the DM or GM. I have looked at pre-written campaigns now, and the only thing that I would say is made easier by it is that the enemies have their stats pre-generated.
Pre-generated,
That's
pre-balanced.
the only easy thing. There is so much. Those things are really impressive. Again, don't play much D&D, but I've taken a look at some of the
preset campaigns. I don't know what they're called in that, but
as one of the campaigns that are written in a book, and the detail is really impressive.
Yeah. But I reckon that must be much harder to game master sometimes because you have all this detail that is like objectively true.
You got to know it all.
And you have to really read through it and understand it all. And there's a capacity when you're running a pre-written campaign to be wrong as a DM
And it's very...
or a GM, and it's
Yeah.
much not the same when you're homebrewing, because if you say something wrong, you either know it yourself or you're making it up. And if you make it up, it's like, that's not true.
It is quite interesting because I'm on a few subreddits that are to do with D&D and other related things. And there are lots of people who talk about they are doing this pre-written campaign and here's what happened when their party chose to go in a different direction or did something unexpected. And they end up homebrewing half of it anyway.
Yeah, it's really interesting. But then if you want to finish the story, like how do you pivot it back into
And
what is written as the rest of the story?
usually when they go to the subreddit asking
Yeah,
how to do
how do
that.
I get this back? How do I, we were playing Pathfinder Giant Slayer and they decided they didn't want to kill any giants. What do I do now?
They've decided their aim is to be fish people instead.
Yeah. And so sometimes I feel like it's restrictive that way. But, I've never really run them, so maybe I get no idea what I'm
You
talking
should
about.
take a look at it
I
sometime.
should, maybe I
It's
should
good
try and
fun.
run one day.
So after that, after MERP, so then you introduced me and a
Yes,
few
we played
other
a
friends
bit of
to
Merc and
it.
things like that.
And
One of your coolest moments as a player that we had fun with behind the scenes happened in a MERP campaign.
was it?
When you, one of the spells had the charm person option.
Oh, that was much more
was a
recent.
guest-
was that MERP?
I think that was MERP,
Damn.
and that was a guest thing. Not a guest, but you came in, you weren't usually
Yeah.
a player, and we introduced you as an old friend of one of the players, so you could join in for a session.
Because I was casting a spell
But
on
that's
to make them
because
think
the
that I was an
wording
old friend.
wording of charm is they think of you an old friend. So I literally just said to them, "This is one of your old friends." They're like, "Great, I'm going to run with that," because that's
Yeah,
the
they
improv
had no
of
reason to
RPGs. And
disbelieve
then
it.
later on, I was like, "So now this spell is worn off. You don't know Danny's character at all. You have never met," and it was
That was
great.
good
That was
fun.
such a fun reveal.
No, I'm talking way back in the
Way back,
teenage
way back, yeah.
years. Now, one of the big things that I definitely struggled with was, oh my god, this is too much freedom. You're letting me say anything and do anything, and typically that meant a lot of murder hoboing.
We're teenagers playing RPGs. You just
It
act like
was
a
too
butthead
free.
to everybody.
I wasn't as bad as some others, but we did keep little tallies on our character sheets of how many
Did you?
people we killed.
Oh, that's terrible. Yeah, right. Free.
But yeah, at one point I took someone prisoner and they were just my hostage. And every time I fell asleep, the other team members would torture them.
Oh no, this is what happens when teenagers play D&D. It just doesn't.
Yep.
It doesn't. Well, that wasn't D&D. Don't play D&D.
Yep.
But it's.
So
After that, I feel like the next major game that I had played was Deadlands. Did you play any Deadlands, or was that only with me?
I played
and
a
my friends?
tiny bit.
Hmm.
But before that, there was a brief period where we tried to just do straight up Rollmaster.
Oh yeah, we barely. I don't
And
think we
that's
played more than-
impossible.
No, Rollmaster character creation. They give you like a blank sheet with nothing on it, and they go, come up with skills that fit within vague categories that we've set up, and give them different points.
Mm-mm.
And then each one will, but you can only level them up maximum of 3 times per level. And here are like 120 skill points to give out. And that's like, it's level 1. And you think, what are you doing to me, Rollmaster?
Legitimately, there is no clarification about whether your skills are meant to be swashbuckling or breathing.
Yeah, it's wild.
It could have been anything.
Yeah, like listening is a skill. You're like, do I need listening skill? Or is that implying I'm leveling up above a normal human's listening?
Jumping. What do we
Yeah.
mean by jumping here?
And it was so much. But the fact that it wasn't fill in the blanks, it wasn't like fill in pre-written skills with how good you are at them. It was, there's an inexhaustible list of skills.
Legit, it
Add
was-
whichever ones you feel like and write them down on this
It
sheet.
was
wild.
jumping, and then we would have to write what does jumping mean based on the skill level. An extra foot per level. We would have to come up with that. It's
Oh, do we need to come up with
nonsensical.
that? It was wild.
Look,
I don't
there
know.
were
It was very
some.
strange.
There was some that I believe may have had suggestions, but they said these are only a couple. You'll need a lot more than this if you want to survive.
Yeah, it was.
Like they
there was a lot.
suggested some very normal things.
Yes.
It was very
It
difficult
was
to figure out.
Honestly, I haven't looked at it for well over for like
No.
a decade, but
The problem is that was not the most frustrating part. I dare say.
Now I disagree. I like
you
this.
think the combat thing?
I like the combat thing.
No.
But I get that you don't. The combat for that was, so rather than, all right, lots of games have different like action economies.
Yeah, like you can do one major action, e.g., attack,
Yeah.
and one minor action, e.g., take 6 steps to the left.
I think one of the most elegant systems of it right now is second edition Pathfinder, which is you have 3 actions per turn. That's all. Anything you do. So if you want to move, then move, then move, you've done 3 actions. If you want to attack and attack and attack, that's 3 actions. If you want to move and attack and then draw a new weapon, that's 3 actions.
3
And so,
attacks is pretty chunky.
yeah, they have a thing where if you do multiple attacks, there's a penalty for every
good.
second and third. So if you're attacking your third one, you're taking like a -10 or
Yeah,
something
great,
as well.
great.
But I think it's really elegant, it's really beautiful. Three action economy
Sure.
is really smart. Lancer, I think, is quite nice. I've been playing a lot of Lancer, which has you move, you take 2 quick actions or 1 full
Yeah,
action. right?
easy.
Great, easy.
But back to Rollmaster.
Rollmaster went, you have you can do as many actions as you want in a turn, and you divvy up the percentage of your time spent in that round.
100% of a turn.
Some actions have a minimum percentage, so to make an attack was a minimum 40% of your action. But if you spend more time attacking, all the way up to 100%, you get extra bonuses and efficacy on that attack. But if you and it was wild, you had to
could
divvy up this
defend
percent.
for 42% of your energy if
was
you wanted
wild.
to.
So
and then you have to figure out what that means.
It was very ridiculous. But I
Unbelievable.
I wish we'd actually got to play that, because I don't think we ever actually played a game. I think we just tried to make
very
characters.
slim amounts. Like, you definitely did world building and things like
Yeah,
that. I think
I
we
was
got to.
preparing
I
for
think
a
we did it a
campaign.
little bit,
Maybe.
but
no, it didn't really work. A bit too complicated. Maybe going back to it now, having experienced more role-playing games, it would make more sense. Or maybe
Perhaps.
it would make less.
Yeah.
Maybe I'd be like, why would they do it this way?
Now I also disagree with your timeline again, because I believe before Deadlands came Dragon Age.
Do you think we did Dragon Age before Deadlands? I will trust you because I have no memory of my entire life. So I will go with that. Dragon Age was really fun. It's a simpler game, especially coming out of Rollmaster, but it's a fairly simple game. It's simpler than D&D or
Absolutely.
Pathfinder
And
or
it's
something like
interesting because the video games for Dragon Age were very clearly D&D based.
Whereas
and then they made their own pared down small version by Green Ronin. That's
Green
the name,
Ronin
right?
was the company. They got the IP for being able to make a Dragon Age RPG. And look, if you enjoy Dragon Age at all as a setting, and even if you don't, go check out the game. It's a very nice, especially if you're getting into RPGs. But even if you've played a lot, it's really smooth. It's really simple. It's really good.
And you know what I find quite remarkable is that those rule books and preset campaigns and everything that I ever read about those were more true to the Dragon Age universe than Dragon Age 3.
Yeah, don't play Dragon Age 3. Instead, play the Dragon Age RPG.
Quite amazing how that happened.
So you took over the Game Master reins for that.
I
did
did because
run any of it, or was it all you?
I don't think you ran any of it because, I mean, Dragon Age is...
Dragon Age
You
was your
definitely
thing.
played a little bit. It was my thing.
It was your thing.
I put in the 500
Yeah.
hours or whatever.
And so you read the rules, you took over as Game Master, and I really enjoyed your campaigns.
Aw.
They were really fun. So we played...
The funny part about this was that my campaign that I originally came up with for this very loosely was going to start out as a MERP campaign.
Oh, fun. And then you pivoted.
Yeah,
Pivoting.
it only made sense. I didn't know anything about MERP. It was a wild idea that I might even try it.
Yeah.
But
You just wanted to take the reins, and then you had a game that worked so much better. It was so that was was that like a
helps when you know the
3d6
universe.
system? You
It
rolled
was.
3d6. One of them was the
Your
dragon
wild die.
which if it hit certain numbers, you would get special results.
yeah, if
and
it
that's how
was
you
a
got
6, you
crits
got a
and
crit. If it was a
stunts
1, you
and-
had to worry.
That was
If you
that
got
was
a
really
triple
fun.
1, then everything exploded.
Yeah. And it was really smooth because basically, yeah, one of them would give you the one of the die was more important. You would add them all together, but based on that one die, you would be like, oh well, now I'm going to have activate certain abilities because there's it was really smart,
Yeah,
really clean,
your
really
basic
smooth.
success failure was all of the dice, but the flash
flourishes,
was that one. Yeah,
And it's different.
they had special flourish tables for it
Yes,
as well.
exactly. Little like extra abilities you could do based on your class.
Yeah, it might have been give you extra movement, or if you were really lucky, give you a second smaller attack, something like that.
Really, and it was done really well. It's sort of mimicking like having feats in D&D were done with this stunt die. It was really good.
It was. Now, there were 2 problems with it. One, I think the level ups were a bit slow.
Taking time to level up, or
No,
the process of doing a level up
what you got per level.
wasn't much.
No, it really wasn't.
That is fair.
The other thing, the armor was broken.
Oh yes, the armor system was broken.
If you wore armor, you could not get hurt.
So the initial system
yeah.
was they would have a flat deduction from the damage that was dealt. So like plate armor takes 4 away from all damage. But then if you have a dagger,
No
it does,
one did 4 damage on level 1.
Dagger did 1d3 plus 1
Yeah.
damage or something. So it was effectively, if you have a dagger and someone has plate armor, you can never defeat them in
Yes.
combat. It was not possible. And I believe we looked on the internet for some advice.
There was a fan-made version where they corrected it a little
To be
and
basically
made
die
it dice-based.
results. And we
the
changed that.
the more armor you wore, the more dice you got to add to your
So basically,
roll.
instead of plate armor being take 4 damage away from everything. It was roll a d6 and take that away. And then like chain armor was roll a d6 -1 or something like that. So it was much smoother system.
Exactly.
And again, mimics a more reasonable idea of plate armor is plate armor, but it doesn't always defend from 4 damage because if they lift their arm up, they've got an exposed armpit. You stab them there with a dagger. Done. Easy.
Yeah.
So we changed over to that. You ran a long campaign for that, which we never fully finished, which was disappointing.
I mean, we finished the entire first thing. It was just I then
Oh, you were
basically
going
came
to
up
do,
with
like, a sequel.
and I created that,
And we never
but
sort of
we
got
are
around
yeah.
to it. I would do that again one day. That was good fun.
It is good fun.
And where's your All A campaign? Let's go to All A.
We definitely could have.
Let's go to
in
All A,
my
everybody.
campaign. My campaign went everywhere.
And we'll run it as a podcast. No, we're not going to do that. Well, maybe. I don't know. Probably not. So we played that. That was great fun. Then I then played some Deadlands. Deadlands it's built on the Savage World system. It's set in a alternate history, 1880s Wild West setting with lots of supernatural stuff. You had to roll too many dice, right? Every action was far too tedious. It was like you rolled your dice to see whether you hit, then you rolled another die to determine where you hit, then you rolled another die to determine how much damage you did, and then you divided that damage by the number of certain points, toughness they had, then you rolled that many dice to see whether or not they got a wound. And it was
and let's not forget that they could use one of their poker chips to avoid a wound.
Yeah. Yes, you do all that and then okay, I play a chip and I don't.
Yeah, you have dice cards and poker chips in this game.
True. Way too many things and overly complicated. They did this is now, I'm talking about old Deadlands. They have done, if you buy Deadlands now, or maybe it's Deadlands Reloaded, I'm not sure, they simplified and smoothed out the whole system.
Oh, yeah.
So it may be very different, but the theming was really fun. The setting was great. Character creation was always really interesting.
I love the character creation.
They have a whole character creation of you take a lot of, and other systems have done this, but you take flaws to get you more points to get more benefits. And so you would have these characters who'd be like, well, I'm really, really good at all this stuff, but that meant that in character creation, I'm also missing an arm and everybody hates me because I'm really mean to everybody. I'm a really surly guy.
Yeah.
And so then you play that, and if you play that up in role-playing, if you play up those negative aspects when you role-play, or you get those poker chip rewards for that, which was great. It was nice that they tried to establish that. Some of it, I'm sure, is a bit non-PC with some of the stuff like, this is a terrible thing. And you're like, oh, maybe you're just describing real people. Oh, you're a big fat guy. So bad, so negative.
I tried to use it to my advantage. You used it as you made your character crazy old, right?
I did make a very old character.
So that was just, oh boy, you've got a lot of frailty bonuses.
But it also really helped with role-playing. I had a character who was a magic user, who one of the options was to have like a really withered and destroyed arm. And I was like, great, this is character building. It happened during a spell. I did all this. It was an injury that was great.
Whereas mine, the one character that I created for it was canonically a girl disguising themselves as a boy to get a foothold in this whole cowboy game. And one of the negatives that I saw from the list was high voice. People don't take you seriously because of your high voice.
So
and I went, cool.
good.
It doesn't need to be an unnatural chipmunk voice. It just makes sense for this.
Works so well. So it was I had a lot of fun with it. One of the things that was wild was the magic system for.
It was quite something.
It was because when you did magic in that game, at least for one of the types of magic, there were a few different types, but one of them was you did magic by, you were a cowboy, or you were like a poker player who had a deal with the devil, and you would basically play poker with a demon. And if you beat the demon, he would have to do what you wanted insofar as the spell. And if you failed, he could like take part of your soul. And so every time you cast a spell, your skill was how many cards you could draw, and then you made the best 5-card poker hand out of that many cards. And based on the poker hand, the better hands would do more stuff. There's like a version of what's that D&D spell with a hand? You can do stuff with a hand.
Oh.
You summon a hand, and I can't remember.
Oh, yeah. Oh
There's
my
a word for
God.
this.
You're right. Just Mage Hand, isn't
Mage Hand. Yeah, but Mage Hand. So it's like a version of Mage Hand, but it was like if you get a pair, 2 2s, 2 4s, whatever, your Mage Hand can lift about half a kilo of stuff. If you got a 4 of a kind, it can push over an entire train. Like you can just derail a train with this magical hand. And so I just thought it was really fun. It was a really cool way to do magic. I really, really liked it. There's so much tedium in some of those mechanics in that game, but the setting and some of this stuff was really, really fun. It's a cool game.
I think we probably have some stories to tell about these ones of just little highlight moments of things going horribly wrong
Oh, yes.
in the campaigns. For example, in my first Dragon Age campaign, we were very long. We had just gotten through everyone's backstory origin campaigns. I believe it was the
Which
first.
was so good for you to run, because that's
I
how the game was built. You
Yeah.
ran them for us. It gave us so much meaning. And run more campaigns for me. Go on.
I think it may have been the first day that we're all together playing as a group in a fight. Lan played our mage, and the very first thing she did was roll a 111. And triple
That's
one,
right.
according to the rules of Dragon Age, means that your soul goes out of your body and gets trapped in the Phage, the magic realm. And
We
this
have
was
to
the
go
very-
rescue her.
And then you had to go and completely change the campaign within like a week. I had to rewrite everything to create a Fade campaign.
That was great. God, what a good game.
That was quite something to
We had
begin
so much-
everything.
Yeah. And that was that whole campaign was great. You should run another campaign. Do you run another Dragon Age campaign?
That would be fun.
Do it. Set it up after this recording. Go start writing one. Get the books again. Reread the books. Get the rules down.
Well, they're just sitting in the corner right there.
Oh, good. Well, then we're done. Let's do it. That'll be great.
Now, Deadlands, I know one of your memorable stories.
I feel like at one point in Deadlands, I fumbled a spell and blew up one of my friends.
But you were trying to intimidate bad guys
And
at
so
the
we
time.
used it as an intimidation
and
tactic.
oh my god, were they
lovely.
afraid?
Yeah, that's how you do it. Just bang, I blew him up. There's an enemy. Yeah, lots of fun stuff. So that was fun. And since then, we played the. You were running a Savage Worlds campaign, the more generic version of the system that's more recent.
Yeah,
The most
that's
recent version of it.
True. It is very much more generic. It's not as
Yeah.
generic as GURPS.
No, but it's still fairly generic.
Does the G in GURPS stand for general
I
or
think so.
universal role playing system?
Yeah.
So yeah,
But it's
but
not
it
too
does.
dissimilar, because you can play that exact same system in space, in the past, in a fantasy world, in a medieval setting. So it's pretty much as general as GURPS.
It is a little tough because world building is something that I struggle at sometimes, and not having anything to go on world building
Maybe
wise.
too much freedom.
But then also not knowing what you can include, what you don't include, things like fantasy racism. Everyone's talking about that now, about how much to
Yeah.
include that, how much is that a thing that we need, or how much of that is good world building. And it's a tough balance. And when you have no world building really, but there is still fantasy racism in the characters
there's
that
some
they
stuff
give
baked
you.
into the rules that you
I
just
was
think, okay,
curious.
that's a bit odd to have that in there. Yeah. It was good fun. But you're right, it is a bit tough. I wonder if we would have benefited more from that by trying to, once we'd come up with a world, go, all right, now let's go back to the rule book and let's really try and tailor it a bit more. Let's cut some things and change some things so the gameplay supports the world you've created a bit more, rather than feeling a bit smacked on top.
It could
And I think
be.
something like that,
Maybe
if we'd
it
put
needs
the
a
effort-
quiet year style thing where
think it
the
does.
group builds up a world
That would be good.
pre-campaign.
Maybe if we do try and play some more Savage Worlds at some point in our lives.
Is there a thing for quiet year? Look, see, quiet year. It's not quite role playing exactly. It's just
It's like story
It's
prompts
communal
almost.
world building,
Yeah.
really, as
yeah,
a
it is
thing.
just communal world building.
But it's always centered around the idea that the world is ending of some sort, isn't
Yes,
it? It
yeah.
always ends with
So
an apocalyptic
for
disaster.
For people who don't know it, if the most recent season of Adventure Zone is probably the best example of it. Not I'm saying the best example, the most accessible and well-known example of it recently. They play a game called The Quiet Year, which is about like 1 year that does lead to a sort of a disaster.
I loved their quiet year.
And they played it
Way more
to
interesting
set up
than
their
I
world
expected
and
it to
to
be.
create their world, and to then also they knew the world was going to lead to a certain disaster sort of feeling. So some of that would be interesting. I don't know if that's specifically like it is its own game to play. You don't need to use it as a pretense, but I think they did a nice example of how to integrate it with a rule set to when you want to create a world for your campaign.
And I think that doing more stuff like that, I wish I'd known it existed. I think it's a great idea.
Might be something to do for if we run another general campaign using Savage Worlds or GURPS.
Yeah,
or something
I
like
think
that.
I could build off that well. I have a thing when I GM, I can't start writing my campaign really. I can come up with a premise, but I can't start playing or writing until I know who everyone's characters are so that I can help build an origin with them.
Well, that was why doing those origin campaigns was so nice for when you ran the Dragon Age. We felt we had a place in that world, and you had callbacks and things to play with.
And they're
people
always
to-
a little bit more railroady than the real campaign.
Yeah, but that's fine.
That's
That's
just-
part of the point.
Exactly.
Right.
I am going to get you all to one place so that you can meet each other, damn it.
It was a very good thing, especially
that's
for
fine.
I feel like some of the people we're playing with weren't very into role-playing games at that time. They have since been much more into them, but so I think it helped them get into the feeling and own their character a bit more. So it was done really well. We played a game that I made.
That's true.
I put together a rule set for a Fallout RPG. Some other rule sets for Fallout RPGs exist. I just wanted to practice and play and also create the sort of thing I wanted out of a Fallout RPG.
Great.
And I really enjoyed that. We had an AP system. I loved that action economy.
Yeah.
I thought that was my favorite. I would play more games if they used the system that I built
Now,
for actions.
I just have to say, I can't remember that much. It was quite some time ago. I think that I had an instrumental role in coming up with that AP system.
Well, sure. You can claim that if you like. And that was really good. That was basically all actions. You know what it is? It's the MERP. It's the Rollmaster system.
It is
You've
not.
got a certain percentage.
No.
No, it wasn't. But you basically had 8 action points.
You don't get to decide how much each action is worth.
Yeah.
That's the GM's job.
And then different actions would take up X amount of points. To be honest, I did it because it's also the way the Fallout video games work.
Exactly.
Right? And so it
That's
just went,
exactly
why
how
aren't we
the game's AP
all
system
RPGs
is.
should work the same way. So we took that idea, same way that Arcanum works as well. Everyone
Yeah,
go play
that's
Arcanum.
true.
Don't play Arcanum. Go back to when you were a child, play the computer game Arcanum as a kid so you can deal with figuring out how the heck the game works. And then as an adult, play it with nostalgia value. It's the best thing you've ever done. So I ran that. I set a Fallout campaign in Sydney Harbour.
Because quite frankly, all of the Fallout games are just a little too America-centric. Not in that there's anything wrong with having a game set in America, but there's only so different that setting one in Washington and setting one in Boston can be.
Exactly. So you set it in Sydney, set on the harbour.
Nuclearized Australian wildlife, guys. Come on.
Our vault was the spiraling car park of the Sydney Opera House. That had been turned into a Fallout vault that you guys came out of. Had lots of fun with it.
The Harbour Bridge was the gangland battle zone that everyone was vying for control over.
Government House was where there was a small settlement of people who were your semi-allies at the start of the campaign.
And the Opera House was a Mirelurk den.
Yep. Oh, man, it was a good campaign.
It was so good. I loved it.
I had a lot of fun running that. We got to sort of the end of the first sort of main act of it. We never really continued on with the second part. But that always just happens.
And you know what? It was fair because I think my character ended up sort of being held hostage away from the rest of the group.
Yeah, it was kind of like a split campaign.
And yeah, I'm pretty sure me and one of the other team members were clearly going to go to war with each other by the end of it.
Yes.
It could have been messy.
But no, I had lots of fun with that. It was fun to build that system. I never fully finished it. It was always kind of being tweaked as we went.
But you're good at that sort of thing anyway.
But it was nice. I thought it had some really nice, really well-designed elements.
It was wonderful.
The combat I thought was smooth. The weapons effects was a thing that I tried to introduce in that, which I thought was a lot of fun.
You could definitely run that for friends again.
Yeah, I should go back and see if I can. I don't remember what I made.
Absolutely a highlight.
So I should go see if I can find those rules again. And
again, they're probably in that box over there.
And then buy the IP to Fallout and make the RPG. But that was a lot of fun. And what's been going on since then? Have we done any other games?
We briefly looked at the World of Darkness rulebook, but we never played it. We just own the rulebook.
I think I own the rulebook. I'd love to play some World of Darkness one day, but maybe not. I don't know.
It's okay. The problem is the initial rulebook, it stays very vague and very generic. It doesn't let you get into specialized
we
stuff.
wanted basically to play Vampire the Masquerade, but that's a sub-book of the World of Darkness rules.
And World of Darkness is just, the world is weird.
Yeah,
stuff might be paranormal, but you're just a human and you can't figure it out.
Yeah. There's lots of... and then other than that, now I've been playing a lot of Lancer recently. I've been running some Lancer campaigns. Lancer I really like. It's a indie game set in super future, and it's very mech combat based, and it does a really nice job of delineating you've got narrative stuff where you're playing through as your pilots running around doing stuff, and it's all very quick and smooth and very easy, more similar to something like a Powered by the Apocalypse game, which, I'm sorry if I'm doing too much jargon, is a whole genre of games with the same rule set where you roll 2d6 and you can either basically succeed, fail, or succeed at a cost. That pretty much sums up most Powered by the Apocalypse games without any real details. So it has that kind of build when you're playing around as pilots, and then combat starts, you jump into your mechs, and it turns into a very tactical RPG positioning and damage and combat stuff. Now, I quite like tactical combat in RPG, so that's why I quite like Lancer. If you don't, you probably shouldn't play it, right?
The funny part for me, the little brief moments that I played Lancer with you, I strangely felt more overpowered when I wasn't in my mech suit.
Yeah,
In my mech suit, everything felt evenly matched, but I felt like I could do anything when I was just a human running around.
Yeah, it was kind of interesting because you'd be like,
because I made myself a mechanic or something, and so I could just do.
You could do whatever you wanted. It was great. But I've been really loving that. I've been loving running it for people, and it's been a great game. It's really fun. Although what I'm thinking, and I haven't asked the players about this, so they might not know. They could be listening to this and be like, "Oh, that's weird." Of pivoting to another game that I've never played, and I've never even seen anybody play, but I've heard a lot of people talk about it, which is Blades in the Dark, which is a game where you play as like a criminal group pulling off heists and doing stuff. And I think that's quite smooth and obviously isn't focused on tactical combat because that's not the whole point.
The whole point is to avoid combat by the sound of it.
Presumably there's very sparse combat rules in a good way, right?
Yeah, I love it.
Because I love tactical, and that's I think an issue with D&D. D&D at its heart is a tactical combat game.
I was going to go into this.
Because that's an issue with stuff, right? People need to play the game that is right for them. D&D is interesting because it has such market control, but often isn't the game people want to play. People are like, I love D&D. I don't like it when you have the combat, and I don't like it when you're dealing with all the numbers and all that sort of stuff. You're like, cool, you don't love D&D. You love role-playing games. D&D is built for different people. You should be playing something else, right? Because you don't like doing the stuff that D&D is good at.
That can absolutely be true.
Right? Because D&D is good at tactical combat, and it's good at this sort of stuff, and it's not so good at, like there are like 18 skills in D&D for swinging a sword, and then there's one skill for the entirety of human communication in any context, no matter what, is all covered by just one roll. But then combat is 18 different decisions every second. Like it's clearly focused on one thing, but it's so all-encompassing that people are playing it and they just basically modify it themselves to take out all the stuff that it's built for. So it's like, play Lancer if you want to also do combat with big robots. And if you don't, play a different game.
Absolutely, that's true for that. And I think that probably takes us to roughly the end of things. Like we said, a couple of D&D games here and there, a couple of other things. The one that I feel needs special mention, which some people have probably seen, is your game that you created last year.
Oh, yeah, that's right. I made a game. I made a game last year called Gateways, about a year ago. Which I've been loving. I ran a few of those on Twitch.
It works really well. It's one of these nice simple perps. If people don't know, there's a whole industry out there of very short, rules light RPGs out there. They usually just call them one-page RPGs.
Yeah, mine's technically not a one-page RPG, but it's in spirit, it's a one-page RPG.
And so, the rules are very simple. They usually are based around just a couple of core mechanics, and then everyone works. It's a lot more fluid.
Yeah, classic ones are Honey Heist, where you're bears trying to steal honey. And
the witch is dead.
Witch is dead. One of the classic ones is lasers and feelings, which is you have two stats, lasers or feelings.
And every roll is about them.
Better you are at lasers, worse you are at feelings, etc. And you roll either one, and you can shift between the two. And it's just play through and just decide whether basically you're having a human moment or a fighting moment, and it's chill.
And so your game Gateways, you come up with a character role, you come up with how portals are produced, and you come up with what you're looking for. And then you use portals to solve every problem that you have in the game with massive successes or dire consequences, depending on your roles.
It's a very simple situation. A portal is either a hole that you can step through, teleports you from here to somewhere nearby, or teleports you from here to anywhere you've ever been in your entire life. The stronger the portal, the more dice you roll, which means the more chance there is for failure, either in the form of the enemy gets something better than you do out of this, or things go wild and wacky and ridiculous. And you can tell I like table lookups because every time you get roll a 1, you have to look up a little table that says, here's the terrible thing that went wrong with your portal today. Maybe you come out of it 20 years in the future. Maybe you come out of it, maybe instead of being able to go through it.
And these can happen quite frequently.
They can. Danny played a game when we were first kind of playing around with it. I was the test subject,
so I played as 2 separate characters. Yes. I decided to base them off the 2 characters from Lethal Weapon, a movie series that I have not seen. But from what I understand, one of them is a little bit more of a rules guy who just wants to get through and retire, and the other one's the wild card.
Yeah, so Danny played as a wild card and a rules follower in what we ended up being a strange sort of fortress/temple protecting the one portal that was originally there that Danny had fallen through that brought her from the modern world
Into a
this
crazy
strange,
future.
crazy future world. She was trying to infiltrate to get back to that portal and go through it. And they don't want anyone to go through it because they'll close the portal, and they worship the portal. It was a whole big thing. But you, very early on, you got inside the gates, you opened a portal that went wrong and started constantly spraying water everywhere. And you're like, oh, that's fine. I'll use that as a distraction. Got in further. You were approached by a bunch of guards.
I created a hole in the ground to try to shoot them somewhere, and I think babies came flying out of the portal.
What was great is there were 10 guards.
Yeah.
5 of them fell through a hole that duplicated the guards. So they came out, for every one guard that went in, 2 guards came out. So now there were 10 guards in that hole, and the other 5 fell through, and they turned into babies. And so really what you did, you turned a situation with 10 guards trying to chase you into a situation with 10 guards, but also they had to look after 5 babies. It was very strange. But then you got through, you found the main temple, you got in there, and then right at the end,
just as we were about to be found out as the infiltrators that we were,
suddenly there was like a boom against the door and water started leaking in, and you realized that that portal had never stopped spraying water, and the entire place was flooded, and the doors exploded and water was coming in, and you were on a rope and half drowning and shooting up to teleport to the roof and finally jumped. It was great. It was a really fun.
It was fantastic.
It's a fun, dynamic, silly game. If you want to watch some of it, we've got them on our YouTube channel for just the archive of our Twitch streams. I'll link that in the show notes. Go check it out. I'll probably be doing more tabletop role-playing stuff on stream this year. I think that's something I'd like to do. Speaking of which, there is another big thing that I have as tabletop role-playing experience, which if you've gotten this far, you will enjoy. I've been playing a lot of games with a Twitch channel called Level 1 Geek. Level 1 Geek is fantastic. Everyone there is lovely. They're all very talented. They're all very... often when you look at role-playing on Twitch, and I have no examples of this because it's not something I do very often, but sometimes you find yourself on a stream and you click on it and you're kind of like, oh, what's going on? It's kind of boring. It's very low energy. Level 1 Geek streams are just so much fun. You go to it and things are happening and people are excited and it's very quick. They're all great performers.
Yeah, that issue tends to be, it's just a funny convergence of people who like playing games versus people who are performing versus people who know how Twitch works. And it's hard to find someone who's all three.
Look, the Level 1 Geek people are across the board. They know how to play, they love playing, they know how to perform, and they know how to run games on Twitch. So I've been playing a lot of games over there. We've been playing a long Pathfinder campaign called Tabletop Treasure Hunters, which is still going. You can catch it next week. It'll jump onto it. There's I'll link to their Twitch channel as well. And I don't have full details yet, but I believe I'll be doing another week-by-week long-term campaign playing Starfinder over there. So I'll let everybody know when that starts, because it's basically going to be another show that I'm in as regular as Escape This Podcast. So I'll let everyone know when that is, because that'll be a great thing for you to all come and watch. Because, yeah, it's a great channel, so you should check it out. Go follow them, and then tell them I told you to follow them, because they'll think I'm cool. But that's been great fun. And playing online like that has been really nice.
And you actually get to play again, which has been a while.
Rather than Game Master. Played lots of fun systems over there. Other than Pathfinder, lots of one-offs of The Witch is Dead or Cult or I can't remember the name of another one, which was a great sci-fi RPG where I played a telekinetic bug man who thanked things all the time.
That one?
It was wonderful. Lots of fun I've had playing with them over there, and I'll be doing more and more of it. And I think also doing some more on our Play This Game _live Twitch channel. I might try and run some more RPG stuff there as well, just because I think it's been fun. It's a nice pivot from computer games into still playing games, but playing some role-playing games there. So if people are interested in that, there's a link to our Twitch channel as well. Follow it, and you can know what's going on every time we do something. And I'll try and announce it more on the podcasts when I did with Gateways, so I'll announce it a little bit more, just so people know what's going on.
Yeah. All right, so that about covers our experience. I don't know how long we've been going, so maybe I should say wind it up, but I want to have a little bit of a conversation about just our preferences with some of these things.
I hate all games. Yeah, go on.
Well, you've already mentioned the whole D&D being very tactical combat heavy, and I feel like that was largely how it started, but it's very interesting because if you go back to very original D&D, anything killed you in one hit. One hit, one accidental step on a trap.
True.
Everything killed you instantly. So you would expect there to be something more to it. Now, I haven't played any original D&D, so I don't know how you were meant to deal with things.
I think that felt more dungeon crawly. It was more about going into a dungeon, into a area, and rather than being tactical combat, it was just like adventure movement. It was, I take a square, what's happening on this new square? Like, I feel like it borrowed a lot from the ideas of something like board games like Hero Quest. The timeline probably swaps those. But this idea of like you're on an adventure, you go moment by moment into this dungeon. What do you find behind this door? What do you find behind this door? There's treasure here. There's goblins here. There's traps here.
It almost feels like they were designed to be a roguelike because, again, everything kills you.
I think they have that feeling. It's not about long-term sprawling fantasy epics. It's more like a roguelike.
And then over time, people became actually invested in the idea of having characters that you could care about, which now it's interesting how that has happened because I find when I've played D&D on those rare occasions, I spend a buttload of time in character creation. I do not feel like I'm just making a combat sim.
No, that's
I
fair.
never end up feeling that way. And I understand there is an awful lot of skill that you can look into in D&D that is based around the combat, but I don't think I see it as unbalanced as some people do. And
I think, to be fair, I think most of my opinions on the balance of D&D is from like 3rd edition D&D, which was a lot more combat focused. Then 4 got really tactical, and I think 5 really stripped it back because they know that it's the kind of the main thing. So they think they did in 5th edition put in more consideration for
that's fair, and I think that's probably the one that I've seen more of, isn't it?
I'm assuming so. I think every time we've played, it's been 5th edition. So maybe it is moving away from that a little bit.
We also have the interesting thing that D&D, more than a lot of these other systems that we've played, it's got a lot of rules. It does. Chunky.
Big rule books.
And people sometimes find that restrictive and hinders their story creation ability, so they want these more flexible, rules-light ones in order to get the story that they want to tell out. That is not how I work as a human. To me, I always prefer the ones where the more rules, the more you can play with the rules and use them in funny ways.
Yeah.
And I think that that's what some of the best examples of tabletop role-playing podcasts have done. Like, you've got your Adventure Zone Balance, you've got your Dungeons and Daddies Season 1. They play with those things because, you know, the players at these stages were only moderately familiar with the systems. They weren't the sort of crazy rules strict people. So they knew that if something was going to be entertaining, it could be a good idea to go with it, even if it slightly was twisting the meaning of one of the spells or whatever. If it felt like it was in spirit enough that you weren't just pulling it out of nowhere and it would be fun, you could work with it.
Yeah.
For example, Dungeons and Daddies, one of the very first things that happens is an interesting side effect of throwing a bag of magic beans that all typically have different effects. But apparently when you throw a bag of magic beans, they just explode normally.
Oh, sure.
Now that would have sucked. So instead they went with, cool, I'm going to throw this bag of magic beans to sort of see what the weird, wacky results are.
Yeah.
And that was fantastic. That was the best moment that any podcast has ever had.
I also think there's like rules are interesting in games, in role-playing games like this, because my general feeling is I think what makes role-playing games more than just collaborative storytelling, which some people like to think about with role-playing games.
Sure, if that's
and
your
some games
preference,
are
that's
built
fine
for
too.
collaborative storytelling, but I like that there is this definiteness to the rules, right? Stuff that just happens.
We've all got the same framework,
and you got to deal with it, right? There is an earnestness to this, right? If you risk your life in a story, right, in a novel, right? When a character risks their life, generally, like, cool, it's not a real risk because they're going to succeed.
We can decide based on the story what's gonna work
but in a role-playing game, when you risk your character's life, it's like your character is risking that, like, you have an X percentage chance to survive this and an X percentage chance to die. It is a real risk, and then the story is going to progress based on the results of that. Like, if we rolled the bad roll and there's a 20% chance your character just dies, that was why it was risky. That was why it was heroic.
Absolutely.
And now they're dead, and we move on with this feeling.
And a good DM can adjust how roles and things work to fit what's going to be best to make everyone happy. The best GMs are the ones who can take whatever happens at face value and turn that into something amazing.
And I will say, I'm not saying that if you're playing the game and you want to say, like, no, my character doesn't die, he lives because I don't want him to be dead. I would rather enjoy myself.
That's what makes you happiest.
That's
okay,
perfectly fine. I'm not saying that's the way you shouldn't play. I'm saying that's the way that I don't want to play. And I wouldn't want, like, if I was game mastering for a person who was like, oh, I don't want to have real consequences in these, I would probably say, cool, I'm not comfortable game mastering with that. You know, let's go. And that's fair, right? People need to have conversations about how they want to play each game they want to play, right? You don't want people playing in ways they don't want. But I've always really liked that feeling of like, no, the dice determines what happens in this case. And then the fun part as the group is moving on story-wise from that, figuring out what happens now, going, oh no, how do we pivot and deal with this? That's the third pivot of the episode. And I've always really enjoyed that as why role-playing games like that are quite fun, right? I love the failure that then and you also have to, it helps for me that I've never been very precious. Precious is a mean way to say it. I've never been very like hyper concerned about a character. If one of my characters dies,
I want my characters to have horrible things happen
right?
to them.
Some terrible things happen. This is great. Let's move on. Of course, look, I'm not saying some people are terrible, right? People will be like, horrible things happen. I'm going to have all your characters' parents get murdered by this evil person. And he's going to come and he's going to sexually
Sometimes it can just be not fun.
No, this is terrible. Why would you do this? That's not how you want to play a game.
But for example, one of the times that we played D&D, my character went up and they were a very hospitable? It doesn't feel quite right as a person. They were just sure. So they saw a random person. They went up. They stuck their arm out to shake their hand. Person gutted me, just straight up stabbed me straight through the guts. I lay there dying.
No!
And I survived that encounter because that's just how stupid stuff worked. And I was going, I didn't deserve to survive this. Are you kidding?
But yeah, no. Look, I've always. I love playing RPGs, and for a while I didn't play many, and it's been nice through Level 1 Geek and through new kind of groups of friends and online play and more people being available for and desiring online stuff, and it's been really nice to have that back as a regular thing in my life because it's fun. It's just fun. It's silly. It's great. It's, I really like tactical combat stuff. I'm happy to play games where there isn't much because you're just going like, oh, how does this combat end? One die roll. We'll see whether you've succeeded, failed, or you've kind of half succeeded. Great, let's go. Let's move on to the next thing. But yeah.
Now, the other thing, you have a good advantage as both a player and a GM.
Advantage? Well, I'm going to roll my D20 twice, take the higher result. Gone.
Cut that. Is that you can improvise very well. And as I say over and over again, that is not a strength of mine. Even when I would GM, I did not leave things to chance. I did not leave things open. I wrote everything. I didn't do, exact word for word scripts, but I knew who everyone was. I knew what would happen if you chose to be nice to a person, if you chose to steal from them, if you chose to raise an entire town with fire. I had everything planned because that's the only way I knew how to work. And that typically is not how GMs do it, to my understanding.
No, well, it depends, right? For me, yeah, I enjoy improvising and changing stuff, but I do plan stuff out. And
I like the idea of being able to change things, and maybe after doing so many Escape This podcasts where changing things is very risky, and even Solve This Murders, where if I want to say, yeah, you know what, that works, it feels like a horrible, horrible risk that I could be derailing everything. Maybe now I'll be better at going back to GMing RPGs where it really doesn't matter.
Well, I'll tell you what my general method for creating things is when I'm making a campaign or just planning out a session.
Create obstacles, not solutions?
No.
Because I do like doing that too.
I don't do that. That is fun. I don't do that. I don't worry about that so much. My big thing is I go, what is true in this universe? Regardless of what the players do today or what I do, like what are the true things here, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like there is this character who exists who is going to be trying to rob a bank, right? Unrelated to what you're like, that's his plan today. If nothing happened, it's kind of like, what are the things in this world that you can discover are true if you're looking for them, or are going to happen regardless of the players being here, or like this, just the things that are just true fact. Like, what is the situation on board this spaceship that they're finding? Well, I tell you, I don't kind of plan out how they're going to discover the information. I don't necessarily plan out, like, what would happen if they didn't go to this. I just go, here is what happened. Here is the truth of the situation. So now when they start to discover stuff, and sometimes I'll be like, there are clues to that in these places. But often it's just like, as long as I know what is fact, then I can play around with whatever they want to do. Like, because they'll be like, okay, we take this and we run this and we take the computer and we throw it at a person. I'm like, cool, well, I know that computer is a special thing that people are obsessed with. So if you throw it at someone, they're going to try and catch it and run away with it and do all that, right? Because that's all I know. Well, I don't know who the person was, but I know.
How do you come up with a wider plot line?
Well, that's a separate thing. I'll often come up with a plot line based on if they've discovered these truths, what happens next, or what are other people going to do, and adding in other characters. So I do come up with plot lines.
Because to me that tends to be the biggest balancing act that everyone has to do is where are the characters going to get their impetus from? And that can mean several things. Like you always want to meet a character who can push the way forward. The characters by no means have to obey that person and just do whatever they said,
Yeah.
but just to have someone offer some directions, maybe not one direction, but some things that could be on offer, or use the origin story method, make each player have something that they want.
Yeah, that works well. Also, depends on your players. Sometimes you struggle so hard to be like, how am I going to make sure these players engage with the story? Then you have to be like, you know what, they're human beings and my friends. I'm just going to say to them,
Hey, can you
engage
engage a
with
little
my
more?
story? Like, what is wrong with
Yeah.
you not playing? Because especially, you know, we're kind of coming at this with that teenage experience of early playing, where sometimes you just have people who are like, I'm not going to engage. I'm going to do dumb stuff. You have to be like, okay, do you actually want to do dumb stuff, or do you want to play? Because I shouldn't need to like spur you to adventure. Be spurred. Why are you playing this game unless you want to be spurred to adventure, right? So sometimes it's about the group, and sometimes it is literally, don't be afraid to have characters just be like, hey, I'd like you to do these things for me, because that's how stories happen, right? You know,
Can't be a video game without a quest board.
and I've played multiple versions. Like when we were playing Deadlands, you know, we basically in character creation had one of the characters build up this desire to be a railroad owner as part of his backstory, and then we were just sort of like, that's the campaign. Why not? Let's go and get you a railroad. Like, that's the whole point of this. What's going to start with the campaign. And you can pivot with that and make new, like, here's why you cut. Like, turns out now you've uncovered this whole corruption ring in the railroads, and they're actually being run by the undead, and you've got to now clear them
there's
out.
got to
and
be
do
a
all that,
demon
and
train, doesn't
there's
there?
a demon train.
Oh.
And like, you build, you know, you get a train, you inherit a train. You always want to be a railroad baron, but then you find out it's haunted because of this, that, and that. Like, that's where you start to play, right? But then sometimes the roles add new things, and you have to be ready to. Are you ready, everybody? Pivot to the new stories.
Sure.
I had this at the end of a Lancer campaign that we were running recently, where there was I had set up a thing, whereas the main truth, right, was there's a dignitary coming from the planet to the station who is going to be signing papers to become part of the Galactic Empire. And yeah, they want that to happen, and maybe he'll get attacked by people or whatever, right? Well, no, I had more details. You know, he gets attacked. There's a whole thing. You have to rescue him. All this stuff.
Sure.
But then preceding that, there's a little downtime section before they even got to this part of the game. And one of the characters went, oh, I want to make a deal with this person to get them to help me out. And they rolled they will help you out, but only for a very difficult favor.
Right.
And the person, I went, oh, this is great, because I know that character is doesn't want this person joining the Galactic Empire. So I'd had them go, all right, I will help you out on the basis that you stop this meeting from going well. Great. Then another character rolled a similar type of check, and to someone who's on the opposite side of this debate, and they will help you out if you give them a favor. And I had that person say, all right, I will help you out if you make sure this meeting goes well. And then they, as a group, had to be like, we're torn between these two goals. You know, each of us we each want something
It's nice
as well.
that the system builds that in exchange for a favor into its roles.
So nice. And so they were like, well, they had to work out between themselves, like, well, which do we want the connection with that person, or do I want the secret information from this person? As a group, we figure out how that's going to go. And now and they spent too long trying to play both sides, and the whole thing fell apart. And it's important having a group that is good at that, right? Because I put their group at odds because I knew that they were going to resolve it well. But that was fun. It was just the dice came up with these two alternate favors, and I thought this is a great opportunity. Latched onto it, and it was fun. It was a really nice finale of trying to please everybody and trick one person while trying to help the other and help the other.
That's a nice way of using the
great.
mechanics. Speaking of using mechanics, and sorry, this is going to pivot all back to my D&D point about combat heaviness and things like that, which is coming from my perspective, pretty much ever since the early days, for quite some time now. I have been ultimate mega pacifist in life in general. There are still some people that you want to punch, but I won't do it.
Sure.
And that has very much bled into my character creation for all of these tabletop games, because however combat light or heavy they are, an awful lot of them, and all of the big ones, are still based around killing people.
Yes.
Yeah. And
that's because they came from combat and wargaming.
And I am now very distinctly trying to pull away from that. And the first time I did it, I think, was in your Fallout campaign, where I hated what this new apocalyptic wasteland world had become. And so I wanted to make it my mission to fix that and stop all of the horrible death. And that has very much bled through in a lot of ways. Like even my Deadlands character What weapon did they have? A whip.
Yeah.
That's not killing anyone. And I have done that very strongly ever since. And it is fun trying to mess with all of these campaigns that are so combat heavy while not doing it. And I do not feel terribly restricted or like I'm using the wrong system. Because it is a deliberate point, I suppose, that I'm making, that I am a character in a world that is very fighty and deathy, trying to live in a way that doesn't align with that.
Yeah, the system in itself is world building because the system says conflicts are solved through violence, and therefore the world in which that system is played has conflicts solved through violence.
Yeah, so I think this is why I'm a little bit more forgiving. Like, you are very much more along the lines of some people are playing D&D and they shouldn't be playing D&D because that's not the system that they seem to want.
And I don't mean this in a gatekeeping way. No. I would hope they would find the game that makes them happier rather than trying to fight against the game they're playing.
Yeah, but I am saying that even the systems that feel like they are leaning in certain directions can be used in ways that you don't expect to really great effect.
Yeah, I like that idea. Using basically the rules are their own form of world building.
I find it's funny because, again, I don't play D&D, but I really respect it as a system. I think it's amazing. And there are a lot of people who go around out there, not liking it by reputation and things like that, or thinking that it's something it's not, or thinking that you have to play it a certain way or it's not real D&D. But no, it's a really great system. I think it's quite spectacular what they've done with it.
It's no merp.
It's no gateways.
It's no gateways.
And like the magic, I love the magic.
I think D&D is such a great example of world building through magic. I love the way that the naming their spells in certain ways is such a subtle but brilliant way to do that. To be like, Melf's acid arrow is the classic example. Who's Melf? Why is this his acid arrow? Oh,
maybe there's a book explaining it, but I don't know.
And then immediately you can be like, I have a wizard character, and because I saw that there was a spell called Melf's acid arrow or Tasha's hideous laughter or whatever, I can now say as my character, that's my goal in life. I want to have a spell that is my spell that people know. Great. I've created a wizard character right now. He has ambitions. He has goals. It's great.
And you get an idea of who the hell was Tasha.
Yeah, and then you look into
their iconic spell is the hideous laughter spell. Damn, that's a character right away.
And it uses these as ways to draw you into the world building. Lancer is very good at this as well. They have weapons with odd names and odd descriptions. You go, what is going on here? And then you look into it and you follow through. There's the most absurd example in Lancer is there's a whole mech where like most of its weapons are written down as like errors. Like there's one gun that's just like called a something gun, but half of the punctuation is wrong, and the entire description of this gun is, this is not a gun. That's the entire flavor text.
Cool.
And then you go, what? And then you read the stuff about this mech, and then you're going, it gets weirder and weirder, and they're like, no one knows how any of this works. It's all interdimensional, strange technology that they stole from it. And then you get into, and you're like, cool, now I'm invested. But I was invested because of this one sentence description that instead of being, the rocket launcher's on this, it was just, this is not a gun. And it was very weird, and it freaked you out.
That's awesome.
That is a really, some games are really good at that, building, dragging you in. And that's one of those things that inherently you lose from a generic system, because but reasonably. And that's why I think things would have been more engaging if we had spent some time kind of adding that in before playing the system.
One other thing that I think adds to the world and your existence, and I feel like this goes in well with one thing that I said about the escape room stuff. With escape rooms, I said, have 2 NPCs. Similar here, don't just have your character engaging with the world. Make sure that your character has some real investment in at least one other player character.
Yes, that always is a really great way to set things up. Even if the whole group doesn't, it's very nice to have an engagement with another character.
Absolutely. And you have one friend who pretty much his entire mission when they play games seems to be to kill one other particular player, no matter who the characters are. You've always a vendetta against that guy.
Yeah.
And it's fun. It's ridiculous how often it happens, but it's fun.
As long as you play it well,
and as long as the people agree that it's okay.
Yeah. All right, we've been talking about games for ages. I hope that's fun. That's our experience with tabletop role-playing games. A lot. We've got stories.
So, some amount. We got some fun stories out of it.
There's heaps of stuff
we've got opinions.
that we forgot to even mention, games that we've probably played that we don't remember.
Definitely.
So, yeah, it's a fun hobby. But yeah, check out other stuff that I've done with it online. We'll probably do more stuff in the future. Check out those Gateways games. Buy Gateways. It's free, but you can also buy it. So buy it. If I were you, I'd spend like $200 on it. Like, sure, it's 4 pages of a PDF, but I think 1,000 is like a steal. So go to there's a link below. You can buy it. $1,000, just throw it down. It's great. But yeah, so thank you everybody. I hope you enjoyed the episode, and I'm not sure what's happening next week.
Oh no, we still
Right?
got one
Probably
more
a couple
week
more weeks
or
of
something.
not.
I don't know
having a
what the
new
date
episode
is.
out.
January's a weird blur.
Yeah, a couple more weeks before the new season starts. We'll put some other bonus stuff, maybe a cross post feed drop, whatever.
Yeah.
We'll find out. I don't have a plan yet, but I have a plan by next episode.
We've got stuff we can do.
So keep smiling and have a gorgeous day. That's our sign off, right? That's our sign off.
Have a gorgeous day.